Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, Godbreaker. The man who rules the world takes on the Asgardian god of thunder in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes, Godbreaker in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Historical Men in Crisis. One of my viewers wanted me to do another installment in the Historical Men in Crisis series. And for this installment in the Historical Men in Crisis series, I'm going to be talking about two rogue police officers, Joseph DeAngelo, also known as the Golden State Killer, and Drew Peterson, who was known for taking the life of possibly two of his wives. Now, the first historical man in crisis I'm going to be talking about is Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. Now, Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. is known for being a serial killer, serial rapist, serial burglar, peeping Tom, and was a former police officer and mechanic who committed at least 13 murders, 51 rapes, and 120 burglaries across California between 1974 and 1976. And he's known for participating in 3 known separate crime sprees throughout the state before it was connected by police to find that it was the very same person. Now, in each of the areas that Joseph James DeAngelo lived, he was known by different aliases as related to being a criminal, and in the San Joaquin Valley, he was known as the Visala Ransacker before he moved to the Sacramento area, where he became known as the East Area Rapist, and also was known in areas like Santa Barbara, Ventura, and Orange counties as the original Night Stalker to differentiate him from Richard Ramirez, and was also known for torturing and threatening victims with obscene phone calls and written communications. Now, as he was found out later on to be the Golden State Killer, he was found out to be this guy who participated in all these crimes, and all of these crimes were the reason why they happened was because Joseph James DeAngelo was a man in crisis ever since he was very young. Now, the main reason why Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. wound up becoming a man in crisis is, I believe, because of his strained relationship with his father. And because he had issues with male authority and male authority figures, this basically put Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. on a dark road to becoming a man in crisis. Now, when Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. was very young, he had a very strained relationship with his father, and as he had a very strained relationship with his father, who was known for his explosive temper and strict disciplinary measures, this made Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. very angry and resentful of male authority figures. And because he was resentful of male authority figures for denying him the power he always wanted, this is where Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. began to separate his life into 2 worlds. One which would be the smooth world on the outside, where he wouldn't have to deal with any conflicts, problems, or obstacles, and a secret world where he could explore the things that he felt would make him feel comfortable about his own natural masculinity and his own natural male sexuality. And as Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. began separating his worlds, what he did was make it look like on the outside he was being raised to be a healthy boy, but in the secret world he was participating in all sorts of dysfunctional and deviant behaviors, and these dysfunctional and deviant behaviors laid the foundation for Joseph DeAngelo Jr. becoming a man in crisis. Now, when Joseph DeAngelo Jr. was a young boy, he witnessed the rape of his sister Connie by 2 airmen in a warehouse in West Germany, where his family was stationed at the time, and I believe that compounded by the abuse of his father, which was the model for his dysfunctional manhood, started to lay the foundation for Joseph James DeAngelo Jr.'s future deviant behavior. Now, as Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. was being an adolescent, he went to Mills Junior High School and Folsom High School, where he got a GED and played on the varsity baseball team, again, on the outside looking normal. However, while he was in high school, he was committing burglaries and torturing and killing animals, showing a foundation for the double life that he would live that would lead to him participating in criminal behavior later on in his life. Now, after getting his GED, Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. joined the Navy and served in Vietnam as a damage controlman on the Piedmont. And after coming out of Vietnam, he then attended Sierra College, where he got his degree in police science, and then earned a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. And as he was earning these degrees, he basically was starting to participate in more deviant behavior, because as he got involved with a woman who was a nursing student, Bonnie Jean Colwell, this is where Joseph James DeAngelo's worlds started to collide, when he demanded that she help him cheat on an abnormal psychology test, ironically, because the person participating in abnormal psychology was Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. Now, after he wound up becoming manipulative and abusive in 1971, this is where Bonnie Jean Colwell wound up breaking up with him, and he attempted to try to force her to marry him by threatening her with a gun. Now, Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. clearly showed he was unfit to be a police officer. However, I believe because of his white male privilege, he wound up getting the job and had that job from 1973 to 1976 until his tendencies for participating in deviant behavior came to the surface, leading to his worlds colliding. And as he was caught shoplifting a hammer and dog repellent, he was sentenced to 6-month probation and fired in October of 1976, I believe, or 1979. And that's where Joseph James DeAngelo Jr.'s resentment of male authority figures started to rise to the surface, as he was exploding in rage regarding being fired as a police officer, and he threatened to kill the chief of police and stalked his home for an extended period of time after being terminated from that position. And after he was terminated from that position, he then wound up getting married to Sharon Huddle, I think in 1973. And after he got married to her in 1973, they purchased a house. And after his wife became a divorce attorney, she had 3 daughters. And as they got married and they were out here, what happened was this is where Joseph James DeAngelo started to become a guy in the secret world, participating in a series of crime sprees. Now, Joseph James DeAngelo, I believe, had a deep resentment for his wife being successful, and he was upset about his wife having all of the success as first a nurse and then becoming a divorce attorney, and her having most of the economic power in the relationship, I believe, was the thing that led to him becoming resentful, and he held all of that resentment inside of himself. And as he held all that resentment for his wife in himself, this is where he looked to go out to the secret world to start to escalate his deviant behaviors in the secret world. Because I believe the main reason why he participated in a lot of the grapes he participated in was all of the anger he had at his wife for becoming an attorney and being the main breadwinner. And as she was the main breadwinner throughout the 1980s, because he was unemployed throughout the 80s, he was angry at his wife for having all the power. And while on the outside he was the doting father who was supposedly perfect to his 3 daughters, he harbored a lot of resentment at his wife. And I believe that's the main reason why he was possibly motivated to participate in all of the rapes and serial killings and other sex crimes is because he wanted to find anonymous women who he could go out here and humiliate and break down the way he wanted to break down his wife. And that's possibly what led to him wanting to go out here and participate in those deviant crimes. And he also went out here and participated in other crimes such as the burglaries because of his obsessive compulsive behavior. And I believe he also wanted to go out here and participate in a lot of the shootings because he felt like he wanted to have power over people. Because in a lot of cases, when it comes to these kinds of individuals, oftentimes because they have power issues, this is the main reason why they go out here and participate in these series of crimes. Now, Joseph James DeAngelo Jr., his first series of crimes started out as the Visala ransacker, and I believe the ransacking was his way of expressing his anger towards all of these people, that he was angry about them having more than what he had. Now, he was a police officer, and I believe he got a sort of thrill by going into people's homes, and as he got a thrill from going into people's homes and taking their items, this gave him a sense of pleasure, and as it gave him a sense of pleasure, he started to get more of a rush as he was committing the ransackings and escalated into burglaries. And as he got a rush of pleasure from participating in the ransackings and going through people's homes and getting power over them, he started to get more pleasure and escalated his crimes into going from ransacking to and vandalizing homes to stealing from homes and burglaries. And then after he broke into the home of Claude Snelling, a professor at the College of the Sequoias, he got an even bigger rush by shooting an individual. And I believe that this basically wound up escalating the dopamine rush that he was getting from committing these crimes. And as he got a further dopamine rush, this is what I believe led to him starting to escalate his crimes from these robberies to the shootings to looking to go out and humiliate women, because this is where he first started to become the East Area Grapist. And when he became the East Area Grapist, this is where he started to express his anger towards his wife, because oftentimes when he first started, he was just targeting women in their homes with children because he wanted to have power. But eventually his standards started to become attacking couples because he wanted to take power from a man like his father, and he wanted to break down and humiliate a woman like his wife. He wanted to take power from the man and the woman because he was angry at his father for taking away his power, and he wanted to take power away from his wife for having all the power in the relationship. And in one incident, DeAngelo said, "I hate you, Bonnie," which really shows me that there was some woman he had a real issue with, which was Bonnie Jean Colwell, who he had the issue with for standing up to him. So he was really projecting his anger at Bonnie for denying him a chance to be married to her, and he was also angry at his wife for going out here and making all the money. So he had a lot of anger in him, and he took it out in these sexual crimes to humiliate the man and the woman over the course of 1976 and 1977 as the East Area Grapist, and further continued on as he was out here. He participated in the Maguire murders at the Martha Air Force Base, where he wound up chasing these people and shooting them to death and murdered them because they were close to a possible location. But I believe he was targeting them to be victims, and they fought back, and that's why he possibly murdered them. And then later on continued to be the Night Stalker, and was the Night Stalker again, I believe, because he wanted to go out here and make women suffer for his lack of power in his relationships. So he was basically like a Pookie gone mad and going out here looking to humiliate and murder people because he was getting off further on the power. And as he was getting off on the power he had over all of these people, this is why he committed all these crimes. And as he was living in the secret world, he was getting a lot of pleasure from living in the secret world and being able to hurt people the way he felt hurt about his childhood. And he was able to maintain a very smooth world for himself for many years, going out here and basically taunting the police by sending things out like the Excitement's Cave poem to the Sacramento Bee, and also putting up homework pages and punishment maps as related to an incident in the 42nd attack where he went out here and again put up these notes and further started making phone calls. This was all a way for him to get power over people and get power to say that he was basically in charge for the first time in his life, and the place where he felt safe about having this power. So he would go out here and, as he was committing these crimes, play these games with these phone calls. And he did this from the 1970s all the way up to 2001, playing this game with police, and played this game with police for many years until eventually it wound up that in 2017 a DNA profile started to appear. And after this DNA profile started to appear, this is where Joseph James DeAngelo's world wound up colliding for the last time, because they started to connect DNA evidence of Joseph James DeAngelo Jr.'s crimes with him. And as they connected DNA evidence with him as related to these crimes, this is where DeAngelo started making his confession. And even though he could not be charged with some of the grapes or burglaries because the statute of limitations had expired, he was charged with the charges with the 13 counts of murder and 13 counts of kidnapping. And on those charges, he wound up getting seeking the death penalty, but he was able to avoid it as part of a plea bargain, and is now serving multiple consecutive life sentences for all of his crimes without the possibility of parole. But with Joseph James DeAngelo, we see a textbook example of what happens when a beta male is someone who is raised dysfunctionally, has issues with male authority figures. What happens is that male winds up entering a place called the secret world, and in that secret world, this is where these men look to get power, and they look to get power by destroying the lives of others. And as they look to destroy the lives of others, they commit heinous crimes, and those heinous crimes basically show us how dangerous these men in crisis can be. Now, the second historical man in crisis I'm going to be talking about is former police officer Drew Peterson. Now, Drew Peterson is a former police officer who was convicted for the murder of his third wife and is believed to be behind the disappearance of his fourth wife, and was also convicted for trying to participate in a solicitation of murder or murder for hire of James Glasgow, the prosecutor who was prosecuting his case. Now, I believe that Drew Peterson wound up on the road to becoming a man in crisis due to the power issues he had with women that he was married to. Now, Drew Peterson basically was on a road to success early on in his life when he graduated from Willowbrook High School in Villa Park, Illinois, and joined the United States Army after graduation, attending the College of DuPage for a year before moving to Falls Church, Virginia, to train to become a military police officer. Now, sometime in that period, he wound up returning to Illinois, where he began a 30-year career as a police officer in the Bolingbrook, Illinois Police Department, and was assigned to the Metropolitan Area Narcotics Squad, where he received a Police Officer of the Year award from the department. However, Drew Peterson, as he was enjoying success as a Police Officer of the Year, sadly wound up becoming a man in crisis because he wound up entering a place I call the secret world. Now, as a police officer of the Metropolitan Area Narcotics Squad, Drew Peterson wound up going into the secret world because a part of his job was being this undercover officer, and as an undercover officer, he was out here working cases as related to narcotics. Moreover, he was working with female police officers, and this led to him separating his world as a police officer from his personal life. And as he separated his two worlds, he wound up expressing his natural masculinity and natural sexuality as a police officer while maintaining a household with his high school sweetheart, Carol Brown, where they had two sons. And sadly, as those worlds wound up colliding when Carol found out about his infidelity, this is what started Drew Peterson on a paradigm of failure as related to relationships that led to him becoming a man in crisis. Now, after Carol Brown found out about Drew Peterson's infidelity, I believe this started an issue with him having as related to relationships with women. And because he was frustrated about his relationship with Carol Brown falling apart and her finding out about his secret world, he harbored some subconscious resentment towards Carol Brown, and that colored all of the relationships he had with women from that point. And after Drew Peterson wound up being divorced from Carol Brown, and she possibly wound up getting child support and spousal support for their marriage and to take care of their two sons, this led to Drew Peterson becoming angry as he wound up marrying Vicky Connolly. Now, as he married Vicky Connolly, and she wound up running a bar that they owned together, and he worked as a police officer, and what happened was he was seething with anger at Carol Brown and took it out on Vicky Connolly. And as he took his anger out at Vicky Connolly and her daughter, who was living in the household until she turned 17, this is where Drew Peterson possibly participated in domestic violence against Vicky Connolly, taking all his anger out at Carol Brown as related to her having more power in the relationship given to her by the family courts. And this is where he wound up going out and looking to hurt his second wife, taking all of his anger out on his second wife that he had on his first and his daughter. And things got to the point where Drew Peterson wound up exploding in a rage, threatening to kill Vicky Connolly and make it look like an accident. And as he was threatening his second wife, he was out here participating in an affair with Kathleen Savio, and I believe he was participating in these affairs because he felt it was a way to passively get power that he wanted. And as he looked to get power over a relationship that he wanted in the secret world by having these affairs, what would happen is he would have affairs with these women, but as these affairs went on, the relationships would deteriorate, and as the relationships deteriorated, Drew Peterson became more and more angry that the women were getting more power in the relationship over him, and as they were getting more power, this is what led to him seething with resentment, and as he seethed with resentment, he basically wound up eventually exploding in a rage when this third marriage to Kathleen Savio wound up failing. And when this marriage to Kathleen Savio wound up failing, this is what led to him participating in an act of violence, and wound up participating in this act of violence where he looked to go out and murder his third wife. Now, as he murdered his third wife, allegedly, what happened was he was upset that she had found out about his affair with Stacey Ann Peterson. And as he had this affair with Stacey Ann Peterson, what happened was Kathleen Savio then filed for divorce. And when she filed for divorce, this is where Drew Peterson exploded in rage, because as he was getting older, he was basically becoming fiscally unstable due to the child support order that was made as related to his marriage to Carol Brown, where he was made to pay child support for the two sons he had with her. And he had to also pay possibly spousal support to Vicky Connolly. And even though he was making very good money as a police sergeant, sadly, it wasn't enough to cover all the child support payments. And this third divorce would basically lead to the thing winding up with him going broke. And this possibly could have been his reason for physically, brutally, allegedly beating Kathleen Savio and taking her life. And it possibly could have been a reason for him to possibly lead to the disappearance of Stacey Ann Peterson, who was the mother of two more of his children. And after she wound up disappearing, this is where Drew Peterson's secret world started to collide with his world as a police officer. And as his worlds wound up colliding, he became the prime suspect in the murder of Kathleen Savio, who was found nude in a bathtub with a gash on the back of her head and a hair full of blood. And as this happened, what happened was that the prosecutor started to find out that evidence as related to connecting Drew Peterson with the murder of Kathleen Savio, and that basically led to the first conviction of Drew Peterson for murder. And Drew Peterson was further charged with more crimes after it was found out that he wound up looking to participate in a solicitation for murder for hire as related to taking the life of the prosecutor, James Glasgow, who was prosecuting his case. Now, Drew Peterson's alleged behaviors as related to these trials just show what happened when you have a beta male who gets involved with women. A lot of times with beta males, they have a hard time dealing with relationships with women, and because they have power struggles with women, they become extremely frustrated, extremely angry, and as their relationships start to fall apart, what they do is look to escape to the secret world, where they hope to have affairs with women in an effort to passively go out here and escape the relationship, but aggressively go out here and hurt the woman they're involved with. However, as the truth comes out about them being in the secret world, this winds up upheaving their world, which leads to these men becoming more and more frustrated. And with each passing relationship that Drew Peterson had with women, it showed that he basically was becoming more and more frustrated at the women in his life for having what he believed to have more power than they did in the relationship. And because he felt powerless, he wanted to take his power by hurting these women. And this is what led to him escalating his behavior into participating in the murder of Kathleen Savio and the whole disappearance of his wife, Stacey Ann Peterson. Again, these behaviors basically went out here and made it where he was out here participating in these behaviors. And this is the reason why, is because he wanted to have power. And the great irony is that while he wanted to have power in his relationships, he didn't have it as a man. Yes, he was a very powerful person as a police officer, but he didn't have that power as a man. And because he felt powerless as a man in these relationships, this is what led to all of his relationships deteriorating. This is what led to him winding up looking to do harm to his wives. And this is what led to him looking to abuse his wives, because he felt powerless as a man. And the only way he felt he had power was through physical power. This is something many beta males believe the only way they can have power, not understanding that if you have the way you take power is by going out here and asserting yourself. But he didn't want to assert himself because he wanted to stay in the secret world where he felt safe about his expressing his natural masculinity and natural sexuality. And as he felt safe about this, his behavior in the secret world became more and more predatory. He went from participating in extramarital affairs to participating in domestic violence to participating in murder. And the scary part is, after taking the life of his wife Kathleen Savio, he thought he could get away with it and keep his world smooth. However, it was Stacey Ann Peterson's sister who basically shattered his world, because she wondered what happened to her sister, who wound up reporting her missing after not hearing from her after a time. Now, Stacey Ann Peterson's disappearance is one that is quite troubling, because according to Drew Peterson, he alleges that Stacey Ann Peterson called him to tell him that she had left him for another man and had left her 2002 Pontiac Grand Am at Bolingbrook's Cloud International Airport. But that whole story doesn't really make sense. I mean, if a woman is leaving her husband for another man, that she wouldn't just go out here and leave a vehicle like that. No, usually what women do is that if they're going to leave a guy, they just take everything. However, the entire story had Stacey Ann Peterson's sister, Cassandra, basically wondering if Drew Peterson possibly did something to lead to her sister dying. And when I look at the pattern of behavior that Drew Peterson had with Vicky Connolly, where he threatened to kill her and make it look like an accident, it basically fits a pattern of behavior that had been escalating as related to Drew Peterson regarding his frustration regarding him not being able to have a functional relationship with women because of his power issues. And this basically compounded with the murder of his third wife, Kathleen Savio, shows me a man who was losing control over himself because he felt like he could not control the relationships with women, escalating from affairs to domestic violence to murder, and possibly, again, looking to make this woman disappear to make his world smooth because she knew too much. So when I look at the whole pattern of Drew Peterson's behavior, it definitely fits the pattern and profile that I talk about in The Man Crisis regarding the frustration of the beta male and how it escalates into criminal behavior. And that's what it looks like to me was happening as related to Drew Peterson's relationships. And he almost got involved with a fifth woman, Christina Rains. And as he got involved with Christina Rains, her father thankfully got involved and issued an ultimatum to her to not get involved with Drew Peterson. And Christina Rains eventually wound up moving out of Drew Peterson's home because of her father's ultimatum, because he feared something would happen to her, and possibly could have something happened to her, because Drew Peterson, as I see it, was a man who was upset over the frustrations he had with women, and his behavior continued to escalate because while he was a police officer with a lot of power, he did not feel like he had power as a man as related to his masculinity and his manhood. And because he didn't feel like he had power over his masculinity and his manhood, this is why he wound up going out here and escalating his violence. So when I look at this whole situation with Drew Peterson, it just continued to get worse. Now, it looked like he almost got away with things until the Illinois state legislature passed a law called Drew's Law that allowed prosecutors to enter hearsay statements under certain conditions, and they wanted to use some of Stacey Ann Peterson's statements regarding his third marriage to find evidence as related to that murder, and eventually they wound up using that law to go out here and prove that Drew Peterson murdered Kathleen Savio. That led to him being sentenced to 38 years in prison, and he was soon found to be participating in a now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are struggling to find their way in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy of The Man Crisis in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Now available in paperback. From the author of the critically acclaimed book, The Man Crisis, comes The Woman Crisis. Learn why so many women have become lost in their quest to have it all in The Woman Crisis. Get your copy of The Woman Crisis in paperback at Amazon.com and online booksellers today.